Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, Adventure Number 1 by Ian Fleming and G.E.Ofili. Illustrators, Berger and G.E.Ofili. Puzzles by Krazy GrandDad. Chapter 1, Crackpots. Most motorcars are conglomerations. That is a long word for bundles. Bundles of steel, wire, rubber, plastic, electricity, oil, petrol, water, and the candy wrappers that children push into its nooks and crannies. Smoke comes out of the back. The horn squawks. And they have white lights that are like big eyes. They are just motor cars, steel boxes on wheels. They are used for running errands and adventuring. But some motor cars, mine for instance, or perhaps yours, are different. If you get to like them and understand them, if you are kind to them and don't scratch their paint or bang their doors, if you fill them up, top them up, and pump them up, if you keep them clean, polished, out of the rain and snow as much as possible, you will find, well, you may find, that they become almost like persons. More than just ordinary persons. They may become magical machines. You don't believe me? All right then. Let me tell you a story about a car. I am sure you can guess its name already. Well, her name, I should say. Then see if you don't agree with me. All motor cars aren't just conglomerations of machinery and fuel. Some are, and some are more. Once upon a time, there was a family named Pot. There was the father, who had been in the Royal Navy. Commander Caractacus Pot was his name. You may think that name Caractacus sounds funny. But in fact, the original Caractacus was the British chieftain who led an English army against Roman invaders. I expect since then there have been many other Caractacuses, but I don't know anything about them. Then there was the mother, Mimsy Pot, and a pair of 8-year-old twins, Jeremy and Jemima. They lived alongside the forest, beside a big lake with an island in the middle. On the other side of the lake, a busy motorway swept away toward the sea. So they had the best of both worlds. Lovely woods for catching beetles, listening to bird songs, and stretching out their hands for dragonflies to perch on. The lake had fish, newts, and tadpoles. There was also a nicely paved road nearby. The truth of the matter was that they did not have enough money to buy a car. All the money they had was spent on necessities. Necessities such as food, heat, electricity, school fees, supplies, and clothes. All those rather mundane things that one doesn't really notice, but families must have. There was only a little money left over for birthdays and holidays. They occasionally enjoyed surprise outings, and the children always loved that. Despite their modest resources, the Potts were a happy family. They enjoyed their simple but enriched lives. They never felt sorry for themselves, or sorry that they did not have a motor car to go adventuring in. Their world was filled with nature, curiosity, learning, and boundless love for one another. Now, Commander Caractacus Pot was an explorer and an inventor. That may have been the reason why the Pot family was not rich. Exploring and inventing things can be very exciting indeed, but it is rare to discover a new butterfly, animal, insect, or mineral that people will pay money to see. And treasures of gold bars, diamonds, and jewels are rarely discovered. Such discoveries do not occur as frequently as written about in books. As for inventions, much of the same challenges apply. The life of an inventor is a difficult one. Rarely does an invention turn into riches. It may be that the invention is brilliant, but it might also be ahead of its time. For such advanced inventions, people rarely embrace them. For you see, people don't really like change. In fact, they are often afraid of change and look upon inventors with suspicion. For example, when Carl and Bertha Benz were inventing their car, they were mocked, and even the church forbade it because it considered their invention the work of the devil. Can you imagine how difficult life must have been for them? But if inventors are one thing, they are determined people. Inventors are rare. They are unique individuals who see the world differently. They toil away to make our lives easier and more productive. Inventors all over the world, from the Americas to Asia, throughout Africa and Europe, are inventing things all the time. Every kind of thing, from rockets that fly to the moon, to new tools that make life easier in the kitchen, or new rubber balls that bounce higher. Everything is being invented or improved upon all the time by somebody, somewhere. Whether by teams of scientists in factories and laboratories, or by men and women, often sitting alone in the kitchen or their workshops, thinking or sketching, driven by the age old mantra, necessity is the mother of invention. Just such a solitary inventor was Commander Caractacus Pot. And I'm sorry to say that because he was always dreaming of impossible inventions and adventures, he was generally known in the neighborhood as Commander Crackpot. You may think that's rude. Well, and so it might be. But Commander Pot was a humorous man. He knew his own shortcomings very well. So when he heard that was his nickname in the neighborhood, he was not at all upset. He just roared with laughter and said, "Well, I'll show them." He would disappear into his workshop and sometimes not emerge for hours and even days. Mimsy and the children were supportive because his inventions were always so clever. Sometimes, when he was deep in his work, he would forget to eat, and Mimsy or the children would bring his breakfast, lunch, or dinner into the workshop. Sometimes he would even sleep in the workshop. Such was his dedication to the art and the craft. Sometimes smoke would come out of the workshop chimney and even delicious smells. Mm. The children would put their ears to the door and they would hear mysterious bubbling and cooking. When Commander Pot would emerge from the workshop, he would be so hungry that he would eat 4 fried eggs, bacon, and drink a huge pot of coffee. After one such breakfast feast, he asked Mimsy to please call Jeremy and Jemima. They were getting into an awful mess. They were digging out a water rat's hole on the bank of the lake. They never caught the water rat, because it would just dig down faster than they could. The twins came and stood side by side, looking at their father, wondering what his invention had been this time. Commander Potts's inventions were not always exciting, like the collapsible coat hangers. Sure, it was smart, but not always something Jeremy and Jemima were particularly interested in. But sometimes the inventions, although quite clever, wouldn't work. One was the square potato. It was easy to slice, pack, and peel, but expensive to grow each one in its little iron box. This time, Commander Pot looked very mysterious. He reached into the pocket of his coat and produced a handful of what looked like round colored sugar sweets. each a bit larger than a marble and wrapped in parchment paper. He chose a red one for Jeremy and a green one for Jemima, then handed them over. Well, sweets are always sweet, thought the children, even though they don't look very exciting. So they unwrapped them and were just about to pop them into their mouths when Commander Pod exclaimed, "Wait! Look at them first, very, very carefully." The children looked at the sweets, and Commander Pot said, "What do you see? What's different about them?" Then Jeremy and Jemima replied in unison, "They've got two small holes drilled through the middle of them." Commander Pot nodded slowly. "Now suck on them," he said. So Jeremy and Jemima popped the sweets into their mouths and busily sucked away. They looked at each other with raised eyebrows, as much as to say, "What do you notice? What do you taste?" "Mine tastes like strawberry." "Mine tastes of peppermint." And both pairs of eyes seemed to say, "They're just sweets, round sweets, and our tongues can feel the holes in them. Otherwise, they're just like any other sweets." But Commander Pot, who could easily see what they were thinking, suddenly held up his hand. "Now stop sucking, both of you. Twiddle the sweets around with your tongues until they're held between your teeth, with the twin holes pointing outwards. Open your lips and blow." Well, of course, the children laughed so much watching each other's faces that they nearly swallowed the sweets. But finally, they managed to compose themselves and position the sweets between their teeth, and they blew. And do you know what? A wonderful shrill whistle sound came out, almost like a steam train. The children were so excited that they went on whistling until Commander Pot sternly told them to stop. He held up his hand. "Now, go on sucking until I tell you to whistle again." And he took out his watch and carefully observed the minute hand. "Now blow," he said. This time, Jeremy and Jemima didn't laugh as much, but managed to get their sweets, which of course were much smaller than before, between their teeth, and they blew. This time, because their sucking had hollowed out the holes and made them larger, the whistle had a deeper tone, like one of the new diesel trains going into a tunnel. They found that they could play all sorts of tricks, such as changing the tone by blocking one hole with their tongues and half closing their lips so as to make a buzzing whistle, and many other variations. But then, what with their sucking and their blowing, the bit between the two holes collapsed, and the sweets made one last deep hoot, then collapsed into bits, as all the sweets do in the end. Jeremy and Jemima both jumped up and down with excitement at Commander Potts's invention and begged for more. Then Commander Pot gave each of them a little bag full of sweets and told them to go out into the garden and practice every whistling tune they could think of. After lunch, he planned to take them to Scrumptious Sweets Limited, the big sweet maker in their local town. He planned to give a demonstration to Lord Scrumptious, who owned the factory, and as they ran into the garden, Commander Pot called after them, "They're called crackpots! Crackpots, whistling sweets!" But the children were already dancing away into the woods, making every kind of whistle sound you can think of, at the same time sucking like mad at their delicious sweets. They really seemed to be something special about Commander Potts's invention. As always, his inventions were quite clever and sometimes very delicious. Well, anyway, I can tell you this. Lord Scrumptious thought so too. After he heard Jeremy and Jemima whistling in his office, he sent them out into the factory. They danced around among the workers, sucking, whistling, and handing out sweets from their pockets. Soon enough, they had all the workers in the factory sucking and whistling, and everyone laughed so much that all the Scrumptious sweet machines had to come to a stop. Lord Scrumptious had to call Jeremy and Jemima away before they brought the whole production line of Scrumptious sweets to a grinding halt. So Jeremy and Jemima went back into Lord Scrumptious's grand office, and there they saw their father being paid. Commander Caractacus Pot was paid £1,000 by the Scrumptious Company treasurer. Then he signed a contract which said he would be paid an additional shilling for every 1,000 crackpot whistling sweets sold by the Scrumptious Company. Jeremy and Jemima didn't think that sounded like very much. But let me tell you a little secret. The Scrumptious Company sells 5 million units of one of their sweets called Chock-a-Hoop. If you work out the arithmetic, then perhaps, Commander Caractacus Pot was not making such a bad deal. So then everyone shook hands, and Lord Scrumptious gave a big box of samples of all the sweets he made to Jeremy and Jemima. The three of them hurried off to share the good news with Mimsy. Straight away, the whole family hired a taxi and went to the bank to deposit the money. Then they all went off to buy a car.